I went to school in South Sudan. I did my high school in South Sudan. So I've had a fair share of going through the school system, the education system in South Sudan, and being able to see what I feel were some of the gaps, or maybe what could be improved. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, honestly, like right now, I feel that we do have an education crisis in South Sudan, because I think right now, as we speak, there are over 2 million children that are out of school. That is a huge number of children that are out of school. And when you look at that, that is more than 70% of all school-aged children. Yeah. So that's a huge number. So a majority of school-aged children in South Sudan are actually not going to school. You see, they're staying at home. Yeah, and this is probably also one of the reasons why literacy rates in South Sudan are really low. Yeah, they are really low. They are actually below 50%. In fact, it said that it's 35% for adults, and we are looking at adults that are 15 years. In this case, this is statistics, takes into account, for example, children who are 15 years over. So yeah, and 35% only. So the rest of the country, you could say, do not know how to read and write. um, they are not very literate in that regard, you see. And even when you look at the literacy rates, for example, from a gender perspective, I think like it's even worse on females. It's much lower there, yeah, compared to, maybe the male counterparts. And I'm telling you, I feel this is a serious crisis that South Sudan need to actually really like tackle, because this is a huge percentage of young people, of children that are not attending school, you see, and so many that are not yet receiving school. And actually, right now, it's said that 1 in 3 children who enroll, for example, in primary school education, they do not finish it.
That's very concerning.
It is. It's very, very concerning. And also, honestly, not 1 in 3, 1 in 10. Yeah. So 90% of people who are actually enrolled in primary school don't complete it. They don't finish. They drop out. Yeah. So it's a very um, very serious and concerning situation that we have with regard to education in South Sudan, honestly. And honestly, when you look at, for example, early childhood development education, or maybe ECD programs, they are almost non-existent. Yeah, especially in the case of South Sudan. Yeah, and 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 I am speaking of this from an experience when there was not yet, so much war as we've seen in the last, 7 or 8 years or 9 years since it broke out in 2013. You see, so this starts. It could be way worse now than it was then. You see, so it's a very concerning situation. And when you look at university or tertiary institutions in particular, South Sudan has very few universities. Okay, we have a population of, I think, about either 10 million or 12 million. That's a big population, but we only have 13 universities. Yeah, that's a quite small number. So imagine if we had a significant, portion of the population going to school, right? These universities wouldn't be enough. And out of the 13, only 7 are government, universities or public institutions, and the rest are private. You see, so it's a very serious situation. So even, the children that are maybe going to secondary school and getting done, they have to either look elsewhere, because I don't think the 13 universities will be able to accommodate all of these kids. It's not possible. I know. So it's definitely a very, very serious issue. And this is even made worse, honestly. When you look at the news and read or listen to maybe uh, the news, or maybe read from what politicians say and so forth, there is a dire humanitarian crisis in South Sudan. And this crisis affects education directly. In fact, there was a report by the World Bank that was released, I think, in 2023 that says over 76% of the South Sudanese population is in need of humanitarian assistance. That's a huge chunk.
It is
Yeah.
more
And
than half the country.
I know.
Mhm.
And that directly does affect education. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So it's the reason probably, why we have very low literacy rates in South Sudan. Very many children that are ideally school aged are not going to school and things like that. And even when you factor in things like natural disasters, it gets worse. Yeah, because things like flood, things like droughts, which are very common in some parts of South Sudan. When you look at places like, for example, Jonglei and other states where they are, flood prone and drought prone, a lot of the kids in those areas do not go to school. Yeah, most of them stay home. You see, so honestly, when you're looking at when you're looking at it from that perspective, you realize that an education calendar is disrupted a lot. It does not continue like you maybe know normally in Kenya or Uganda or elsewhere. Yeah, there's constant disruption of the educational life of a South Sudanese child. And it's not just once, it's not twice, so many, you see, that happen. So things like the droughts and the flood that are very rampant did not just disrupt that, education calendar, but also, they basically affect already a very fragile infrastructure. Yeah. Because most of these schools, for example, we have a lot of schools in South Sudan that are under trees. Yeah. There's no building, no anything. Kids come and they study under the trees. And there are even cases where people write on the ground. Yeah, no books. You write actually on the ground. And speaking from a personal experience, that is something I personally went through. Yeah. When I did my elementary, the school I went to, we did not have a class. Yeah, there was no building or anything. So we had this huge tree that we were studying under. Yeah. And we used to sit on the floor. We sit on the floor and then we are told to come with the sticks. That's how we learned, numbers, counting and so forth. So we'd use some of those sticks for counting, but also we use them for writing on the ground. Yeah. So learning how to write and stuff like that. And eventually, I think it was UNICEF. I think UNICEF, yeah. They brought for us blackboards, very small blackboards. They're like small like this. Yeah.
And you'll be hung on the tree.
No, they're very small. You can hold them in your hand. Yes. Yeah, they're very small. So you write on them and then you rub off. Yeah. So we used to, and then we were provided with those. So we didn't have books. They're not there. No, because once you've written and then you rub it off and it's gone. Yeah, it's gone. So, so yeah, and it's so unfortunate that in so many parts of South Sudan, that is still the case. You see that so many South Sudanese children are learning under trees and did not have books. They lack the books. Did not have pens. Right, for girls, did not have the menstrual. Hygiene materials they need to be able to stay in school, and stuff like that. So I think when you look at all of these things together, you start to see why we have a crisis, an education crisis in South Sudan. And it's probably the reason why the literacy rates, yeah, it's just very low. They remain very, very low. And even the quality of education itself in South Sudan remains very low. Yeah, mostly due to some of these factors, but also due to lack of funding, lack of investment in education by the government. But also, many teachers are honestly not qualified. They are underqualified, underpaid, and in most cases, unpaid.